James, you got your witness?
Mr. Sampson.
Sampson. Robert?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your name and address for the record?
My name is Rob Sampson. I live at 276 Bound Line Road, Wolcott, Connecticut.
Okay. And you have been a candidate for election in the state of Connecticut?
Yes,
How many times have you run for office?
I ran the very first time in 2010 and was elected, started my service in 2011, and I've been re-elected 3 times subsequently.
Had you ever served in any elected office before then?
I did not.
And you were a candidate in 2014?
Yes.
I'm going to hand you what's been previously admitted as State's Exhibit 25. Just take a look at that. So that, can you confirm that that's your signature?
Yes, I remember signing it.
And what is that document?
It looks like an SEEC Form 1 and 1A,
And-
registration of candidate.
And so that's, what does that document do?
It looks like I'm confirming my identity and willingness to participate as a candidate for public office.
Okay. All right, just wanted to confirm that was yours. Thank you. I'm showing you now what's been previously admitted as State Exhibit 27. If you could just take a look at that. Do you recognize that document?
Yep, it's my handwriting on the front page.
So I think it's a the CEP 10 affidavit of intent to abide by the Citizen Election Program rules. Did you execute that document?
My signature and initials are here.
And what's the date on that?
January 20th of 2014.
Okay. Did you and do you recognize those as your initials there? Is that the way you initial documents?
Yes.
Okay. Specifically, I'd ask you to look at, well, what did you understand that document to be doing when you executed it?
I'm sure I read it thoroughly at the time, but I don't recall right now unless I read it again.
But as far as your understanding, just looking at it now, what does that document do?
It says it's a candidate certification, and from listening to the conversation, it sounds like this is where you certify that you're going to follow the rules that the SEEC puts forth and obey the law.
Specifically, I'd ask you to look at number 2. Did you initial that?
Yes.
And what does that require?
It says that I certify that my candidate committee will expend money received from the Citizens Election Fund in accordance with the provisions in Statute 9607G and with regulations adopted by SEEC.
And does it go on from there?
It says that I am personally liable and must repay to the Citizens Election Fund any monies that are not expended in accordance with the same statutes.
Okay. Do you recall executing that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks. I'm going to hand you what's been previously admitted as State's Exhibit 28. You could just look at that for me. That is the SEEC Form CEP 15 grant application form, just for the record.
Yep.
Do you recognize that document?
Yep.
And what do you recognize it to be?
As you just stated, it's a application for public grant dollars.
And what is the purpose of that document from your understanding?
I assume this is the paperwork that our candidate committee submitted once we had reached the threshold of the number of donors and contributors to our campaign to apply from a grant from the Citizens Election Program.
Okay. And once again, could I ask you to look at number 2 and see if that's your initial there?
Yep, my initials are on here.
And if you could read that over and tell me what effect that has.
As stated by Senator Markley, same thing. It says that I am required to read, understand, and comply with the requirements of the program, statutes, regulations, and declaratory rulings.
And does it go on from there?
It says that if I fail to abide by the requirements of the applicable statutes and regulations relating to the program, this may result in penalties from SEEC.
Okay. And did you understand that when you executed that document?
Yeah, it's in perfect English, and I've always felt it was my obligation to obey the law, whether it's written on the paper in front of me or not.
Okay, thank you. Can I have that back? So your candidate committee applied for a grant. Do you recall if you received a grant?
Yes.
Do you recall how much of a grant you received?
I would only be guessing. I know that the total amount that we have to spend as a candidate for state representative, if you are participating in the program, is around $30,000.
Okay.
So we raised $5,000, give or take, although I think we raised substantially more than that. So the grant would have been reduced by the amount over $5,000. I don't know. I'd say somewhere around $25,000.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. I can show you documents, but, you know, they're already in the record, so it's not necessary, but you're close. But anyway, it's about 27,000, I think, so it went up, inflation. So do you understand, are there any differences between the requirements that apply to a participating candidate committee and a non-participating candidate committee?
My understanding of the statute, 9607B, I believe it is that you are limited in what you can spend on your campaign to things that are for the benefit of your nomination or election. And I imagine the law exists to prevent you from raising money and then spending it on a beach house somewhere. And I think that's pretty much understood by all candidates, that if you're going to, be receiving money for your campaign, you have to spend it on your campaign. I understand that there are regulations that pertain to the Citizens Election Program also, but I don't see that they say anything contrary to that.
Do they add any additional requirements?
We could certainly read the statute,
You and I?
or the regulation, yes.
That's okay. I'm just asking from your personal knowledge, do you know if there are any additional requirements placed upon the participating candidates?
I have it in front of me. I can read it for you if you like.
That's okay. I don't need you to read it. I'm just asking you to reflect from your personal knowledge.
Yeah, it says more or less the same thing as the underlying statute that applies to everyone, which is that you need to spend the money on your campaign.
Okay. It escapes me. Had another question. Are you familiar with the distinction between a participating candidate and a qualified candidate committee?
My guess would be that a qualified candidate would be someone who has already surpassed the threshold and received a grant, but that's only a guess.
So you said you were first elected in 2010, correct?
Yes.
And in all that time, have you participated in the Citizens Election Program?
Yes.
Okay. So in your, did you bring any documentation with you today in addition to what we already had?
Only the mail items themselves.
Okay. And we already have those, and so I appreciate your bringing those for us.
Sure.
On the mail, it states that you had reviewed and approved all those mailers. Did you actually review and approve them?
Yeah, I designed them all personally.
Okay, so
The only exception is the letter that was sent by Senator Markley,
Oh, okay.
which I certainly consulted on and approved, but he wrote the letter.
Okay. So that was mostly Senator Markley, and the rest you designed primarily?
That's correct, yes. And in fact, many of those mailers I had designed in 2012, and I just updated what was necessary to make them worthwhile again for 2014.
Okay.
Paid for language, et cetera.
Good afternoon, Representative.
Good afternoon.
I am going to give you a couple of your bits of handiwork here. Your ads. I guess I'll start with, again, States Exhibit 5. And look familiar?
Is this the 2014 ad?
That is the 2014 ad.
Okay.
And who designed that piece?
I did, although I did have Senator Markley's help with some of the text. And largely, it was designed before my 2012 campaign. And we made some minor revisions and reused the same campaign piece in 2014. And I also used it again in 2016.
Okay, again, well, I'll just give you Respondents Exhibit G, which is the 2012 piece.
Okay?
And you designed that one as well.
Yes,
Okay. They both mention Governor Malloy policies.
that is correct.
Okay. Can you tell me what they say about the governor's policies?
As was previously stated, we refer to fighting the governor's reckless spending and voting against his budget proposal. We refer to his proposal for the early release of violent felons and his proposal to put in a busway from New Britain to Hartford, which we were both in opposition to.
Okay. Are these issues that are important to your legislative district?
Absolutely. In fact, that's why the heading under each one of these addresses the voters in my district specifically. It says, for Southington taxpayers. I'm explaining to my Southington taxpayers that I'm opposed to the governor's policy to raise taxes, because I think that's valuable information for them to make a decision about whether they should elect me or not. I'm explaining to senior citizens about different things, about veterans, about where I stand on issues. And the references to Governor Malloy all include references to Governor Malloy's policy agenda and not the man himself.
Okay, so you feel do you feel it's an attack on candidate Malloy?
Absolutely not. I'd also say that the advisory opinion doesn't just say attack, it says promotes the defeat of, and it certainly doesn't promote the defeat of or anyone else's electoral chances besides Senator Markley and myself. We're the only people that are thought of in this ad. It is purely informational for voters to know where we stand on issues. I don't know how anyone could say that where we stand on these issues that the governor has come out with are not relevant to voters for state rep and state senate in my district. It's the most valuable information they could possibly ask for.
Representative Sampson, what exhibit number do you have in front of you there?
I think it's 5.
Okay.
I also have the 2012 version, which I don't know.
Which is
G.
our Exhibit G.
Yeah.
Respondent
Okay.
Exhibit G and States Exhibit 5. So referring back to that advisory opinion with its two-pronged test created by the SEEC, do you feel that, and it's, again, this is their wording, that the communication is not directly related to a candidate's own race?
It's clearly directly related to my race and to Senator Markley's race.
And does it promote the defeat or attack Governor Malloy in this case?
I don't think so. I think making a factual statement on where you stand on the executive branch's policies, the governor's policies, is valuable information for voters. I don't know how anyone could say it's not related to. It seems to me a lot of this conversation is about not what it actually says, but what it doesn't say. It says, the advisory opinion says, to be within the law, it has to be directly related to my own race. And it keeps being argued about whether it's not directly related. Well, I mean, the test is it directly related to my race? And the answer is yes. So, to me, it's done, right there. As far as attacking or promoting another candidate, there's nothing in here that says to vote for or against Dan Malloy or for any other candidate. And there were numerous other candidates. And I don't know how I would manage to decide how much I'm benefiting anyone else if I was, because I didn't even know at that time who was going to be receiving votes for governor. There were numerous candidates that received votes for governor, write-in ballots, candidates that are both on the Republican and Democrat side. My motivation for creating this mail piece in 2012 and then using it again in 2014 was only to explain to voters what I thought was most important to them, which is where I stand on a legislative agenda that's going to be before me.
So you feel that everything contained in there pertained to the legislative race, not the executive?
Yes.
What's your understanding of the legislature's role in our constitutional separation of powers?
Certainly the legislature is the deliberative body that makes laws, but proposals for law come from a lot of different places, come from individual legislators, they come from constituents, citizens, they come from lobbying entities, they also come from the executive branch. As was previously mentioned, the governor is the one who proposed the budget that included the tax hikes. To mention the governor's proposal to raise tax hikes and what my position is, it seems crazy to me that that's not important to the voters in my district. I don't know what could be more important to them.
We were discussing with Senator Markley the apportionment of the expenditures for this ad in particular, but a couple of other ads you've done. Did you contact SEEC?
My mom served as my deputy treasurer.
Thank you, Mom.
And she contacted Andrew Cascudo at SEEC throughout all of my campaigns that she served as deputy treasurer. And she asked for clarification because we were very concerned about being accurate and within the confines of the rules and the law with regard to the apportionment of the spending on each of these mail pieces that I did in conjunction with Senator Markley. I'd also note that the complaint that we are dealing with was brought by John Mazurek, who was my opponent in 2014. And I thought this was a nuisance complaint, and I still do. And the reason why I thought that is because he would do anything to disrupt my campaign, whether it was ethical or not, including the previous complaint he filed against me, 2014-099, which I hope you guys would be aware of, because that's the complaint that he filed questioning the apportionment of the funds for the campaign mailers that Senator Markley and I did together, including these campaign mailers. And that complaint was dismissed entirely and found that we had obeyed every letter of the law and there was no concern about what we did. It was also never mentioned that there was anything wrong with these mailers at the time when you guys were in possession of them.
Okay, so when you or your mom, in this case, have a question about how to apportion, they feel comfortable reaching out to SEC?
Yes, and I'm quite certain if I went and bothered my mom, who was a senior citizen who had knee surgery recently, and said, go find all the emails to where you talked to Andrew about how to divvy this up, she would gladly do it. And as Senator Markley pointed out, the trifold flyer, it has 6 panels on it. And I remember when I designed the mailer, I was like, well, should he be paying half? He's only on a portion of it. Should he be on 1/12? Because he's only on half of one of the 6 panels. So we asked the question. And they said the most fair thing to do was to divvy it up where he pays 1/6 of the expenditure. And that's why we did it that way.
And I'm handing you State's Exhibit 6, which is the trifold you were just discussing.
Also, this, one other thing I'd say about this is that this also was pretty much designed in 2012. I only made minor changes to it to use it in 2014. And I'd also note that if you guys are tracking the cost of these, my opponent only complained about one of them. I don't know which one it was, but when it was reprinted, I made minor changes. I don't think anything relevant to this discussion, but he only complained about one of those.
So you know how to make a joint expenditure.
Yes.
If you have questions, you know what to do, who to ask.
Yes.
Did you think to ask about apportioning some of that to Tom Foley?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because I didn't see that these expenditures were relevant to anyone but Senator Markley and I, for the reason I stated, which is that we were trying to inform the voters in our district where we stand on these issues so they can make an informed choice on who to elect. To me, that's my job as a candidate, is to try and put forward as much factual information to get people to understand where I'm coming from and what I will do as their elected official. If I'm restricted from saying that I oppose or endorse the policies of a sitting governor, I mean, what are they going to get to vote on? Just for the ease of being able to describe a policy too. I mean, you know, we're relegated to sending out flyers and mailers to contact our voters. Sometimes you can send a letter, write a radio ad, but you don't have an attention span that I could go through the entire content of a budget in every issue. People knew it as Governor Malloy's budget, Governor Malloy's tax hike, and they knew whether they were for it or against it, and I wanted to make sure they could identify where my position was also.
Do you think prohibiting you from referring to the governor's policies restricts your freedom of speech?
Absolutely. When I became aware of the advisory opinion, which is a few days after it was issued, an email came from my House Republican caucus explaining that it had come down. I glanced at it and I said, this doesn't apply to me, because I read the language in it, and it said you have to use communications that are directly related to your own race, and I felt that I had in every way. And it said promotes the defeat of or attacks a candidate, and none of my correspondence anywhere has ever said anything about promoting Tom Foley or Jonathan Pelto or Joe Visconti or any of the other people that were running for governor, and it never attacked anyone to say vote against Dan Malloy or anyone else. It only said I disagree with the policy agenda of a sitting governor, totally relevant to the people who get to vote for me or not.
So this would have benefited anybody else on the ballot, not just Tom Foley?
Potentially.
Let me go back. And if this was an attack on Malloy, would it benefit all candidates for governor or just the Republican candidate for governor?
I suppose you could make an argument of that, although I don't know how much it matters whether or not one legislative candidate is for or against any other legislative candidate or executive branch office candidate. I don't know that matters. People endorse each other all the time. I don't know if it makes any difference whatsoever. Again, the motivation here was to tell the voters, I plan to be a check on Governor Malloy and his agenda. From a policy standpoint, I believed that in 2012, and I believed that in 2014, and I still believe it today. In fact, I am proud to walk around and say that I am the greatest check against Governor Malloy's policy agenda, and I hope this gets me more attention in that regard. But it's not about not electing Governor Malloy. It's about where I stand, which is in opposition to his policy agenda. And I believe that's an expenditure directly related to my campaign. And I believe it's permissible under 9607B. I mean, the question was 9601 says what an expenditure is, but you did fail to talk about 9607, which says permissible expenditures. And that
Representative Sampson, I think you've gone a little beyond the original question.
Thank you.
He was on a roll.
This is a little much. I would ask him just to.
Finally, in regards to the mail pieces that we're discussing here today, all the state's exhibits, do you remember when they were requested from the printer or ordered?
I was asked a question early on in this investigation, and I answered by email.
Do you have that email in your,
I think that's one of the
When what was
exhibits.
requested from the printer?
these particular ads? When the order for these ads was put in, or when the drafts went to the printer?
Yeah, all I would say is that it's been a long time now, and it was very fresh in my mind at the time, and I would rely on what I said in that email as to be as factual as I
Would you
possibly
like
could
to
be.
look at that email and refresh
If you want to talk
your
about the
recollection?
details of it, sure.
just some of the dates? I know you responded to the investigators here.
Is there a specific question?
Can you just give me a time, to the best of your knowledge?
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I mean, the only mailing that was really done after the advisory opinion, and again, my position about the advisory opinion was not relevant to any of these mail pieces anyway. And I also knew that I had a protected constitutional right for speech, and that there was nothing in the way of it.
Representative Sampson, I think the question was, if you could tell us the date after the advisory opinion came out of the mailers, that would be helpful.
The only item that I'm aware of is Exhibit 1, which is the letter from Senator Markley addressing candidate John Mazurek, and we...
Okay, that was Exhibit 1 in the complaint, that is State's Exhibit 4.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, it's
here.
my Exhibit
So-
1 in the complaint, yes.
State's Exhibit 4?
And that was the only one drafted after?
The other items were all completed prior to. I cannot swear to the exact date that they were mailed by the print house. I instructed them to mail them prior to that date, and I did pay for some of them after the fact, but it was already done. I mean, the mail pieces were manufactured designed, printed, and I certainly can document that. Even the files on my computer, I looked at them, and all the dates are from August and September when I made them.
I have no further questions. Sorry.
So, from your direct testimony, you specifically wanted to identify Governor Malloy.
I wanted to identify my positions with reference to Governor Malloy's policies.
No, but you specifically wanted to tie these policies to Governor Malloy.
I described Governor Malloy's tax hike because that's what it
Could you
was.
just answer the question, please? Did you want to tie these policies to Governor Malloy?
This is
You intended to use Governor Malloy's name.
it's like the Brooklyn Bridge is the bridge in Brooklyn. I wouldn't describe it any other way. Governor Malloy's tax hike is Governor Malloy's tax hike.
That's a good point. When you as a legislator vote on a budget, the governor walks in and he plops it on the desk and you guys just vote on it, correct?
No,
So somebody has to introduce it into the legislative body?
that is correct.
And who does that? The governor?
It could be any number of legislators that introduce it on the
But
floor.
a legislator does.
Sure, but it's still the policy agenda of the governor as crafted by him,
And who's the majority in the legislature?
the Democratic Party.
And so it would have equally have been accurate to say, I voted against the Democrats' budget, correct?
Yes, equally, and in places I do say that also.
Question, please. So, but instead, you intended to clearly identify Governor Malloy.
I
Yes or
described
no?
the tax hike in a way that would be known to my constituents. My constituents understood it to be Malloy's tax hike.
So you wanted,
And that's a bad example. Why don't you ask me about the busway? That's a proposal he put forward. The early release program, a proposal he put forward.
and once again, I would go back to the busway. He just went out there, started digging, and the busway is in existence. It doesn't go before the legislature at all, correct? There's no role that the Democrats in the legislature played in introducing these policies, the busway, the early release of felons. It wouldn't be as accurate to say a Democrat policy.
The executive branch still is responsible for putting forth an agenda and creating, I won't say law, but they govern.
So right.
So decisions about the policies of the state are determined by the executive, independent of the legislature.
So once again, I get back to my original question. When you drafted, and by your own admission, you drafted these ads and flyers and whatever you want to call them, you intended to identify Governor Malloy.
I did it so
Yes
that my
or no?
constituents, again,
Yes
but
or no?
you're leading me to
I
say
am
why I
allowed
did it.
to lead. That is
Yes.
the whole
Well,
point.
the answer is no if you're
The
going
answer
to.
is no.
If you're going to make a requirement about why. Did you mention Governor Malloy? Yes. Did I do it for a specific purpose that you are indicating? No.
No, I just asked, did you intend to mention Governor Malloy?
Yes. Clearly I did. I wrote his name on the
Thank you
document.
for your answer. I appreciate that your mother served as deputy treasurer.
Me too. I don't know if I can get her to do it again
you-
after.
She might be
I-
subpoenaed.
I would ask the hearing officer, please, if he would just
Yeah, we're
keep
gonna-
some comments to himself, please. Thank you.
Hey, forgive me, but
There's no question pending.
Do you know, sitting here today, that your mother contacted SEEC in 2014 to ask about apportionment of these ads that you originally designed in 2012?
I would say yes.
You would say yes. Do
Very-
you know?
I'm very confident of it.
Wait, you asked
It
in
was asked-
2014
asked
about
and
the
answered.
2012 ads.
No, I said the ad, did she contact him?
In
us
2014 about the 2012
I
ads.
object.
About the ads that he originally
Attorney
designed?
Cronin
Attorney
has
Cronin.
absolutely no
Right.
objection before this body.
I'm asking for clarification. You asked two different
Well,
years.
then you would say, objection, I would like the question clarified.
Then
Or could you
objection.
phrase it differently, or does he understand it?
I will rephrase my question. Sitting here today, can you swear under oath that your mother contacted SEEC about the apportionment of these ads in 2014?
I can't swear to what my mother did. That's my understanding.
Okay.
If she told me, I have to assume that she did. You want me to swear to a phone
The
call?
answer,
I was not.
the
Sorry.
question has been answered.
Just a second. I have nothing further this time.
Okay, I just have a couple quick questions. Again, the Attorney Cronin asked if you found that the commission's advisory opinion violated your free speech. Do you recall that question?
Not really, but I believe you.
Okay. He also asked if you believe that the advisory opinion and the commission's application of these laws violated the Constitution. Do you remember that?
Vaguely, yes.
And just so we understand your understanding of what the commission's doing and the legal process involved here, do you believe that the commission has the authority to adjudicate free speech?
No.
Okay. Do you have a belief that we have the authority to adjudicate and issue rulings on the United States Constitution?
No.
Do you believe that our functions are limited to applying, interpreting, and conducting investigations and hearings regarding the Title IX elections?
I'm not familiar with the term Title IX.
I'm sorry,
But
Chapter 155 and Chapter 150, the election
I'm not familiar with those
statutes.
things either, but election
Okay.
statutes, yes.
Okay, final question. Well, final two questions. When you made the 2014 mailings, did you ask the town committee in your jurisdiction to help out to make the expenditure?
No.
Okay. Do you believe that it would have been a permissible expenditure if they had shared the costs with you for any of those 5 or 6?
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
That would have been a question I had asked my treasurer to ask SEC before I went ahead.
Okay. And you answered Attorney Cronin's question about you didn't reach out to Tom Foley. I remember that. But did you ask the Central Committee, the Republican State Central Committee, did you ask them to share or portion or participate in any of these joint communications?
No.
Only if you know, do you think that would have been a permissible expenditure?
Again, I would have had to ask SEC for a ruling in advance.
Okay, let me just see here. Oh, finally. In either email, phone calls, correspondence, in-person training sessions, can you identify the words that this commission have told you not to use in your mailers?
No.
Okay. Can you identify any phrases we've told you not to use in these mailers?
No.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Just a couple of quick ones. In 2014, did you contact the Green Party about apportioning any expenses?
Shockingly, no.
Did you contact any write-in candidates about apportioning any expenditures?
I had no reason to, so I did not.
Do you think if there was an ad attacking Malloy, it would have benefited candidates beside the Republican?
Certainly.
And finally, do you believe that SEEC rulings or policies can implicate constitutional rights?
Certainly. They can certainly attempt to. Whether they actually are successful, I would say in my case they were not, because I went ahead with my mailings, thankfully, before I even was aware of the advisory opinion. But I believe other candidates had their opportunities to use their free speech in their political campaigns taken from them because of fear of repercussions from this body.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.